The title of the talk is Imperialism, Drugs, and Social Control. And the problem you have about talking about imperialism is that it's not accepted as a legitimate word by the major media, by our political leaders, by most of our mainstream academics. That is, they do not believe that imperialism, which has been and still is the most powerful force in the history of this world, in shaping the map of this world, they do not believe that it exists. If you say 19th century British imperialism, they'll say, oh, yes. Yeah. Or if you say Soviet imperialism, they'll say, oh, yes. But if you say US imperialism or Western imperialism, they'll say, you're being ideological, aren't you? What are you talking about? Oh, do you have a conspiracy theory? Which reminds me, there's something I want to add to this lecture, but I forgot to. Just wait a second, since we're waiting for the sound. Okay. Imperialism, what they talk about in academia, you can't talk about imperialism. You cannot write your master's thesis or your PhD. If you go to your advisor and say, I want to do something on Western imperialism in Central America. And they say, we don't like to do ideological things. You have to do scientific, empirical stuff, and that's not a real subject. So you say, well, can I do something on development theory and dependency theory? Oh, yeah, you could do that. So you call it development theory. But if you start talking about the realities of imperialism when you write that, they'll say, well, it seems to me you're being ideological again, not realizing how ideological they are in rejecting the terrible realities of what's going on in the world. Imperialism is when the ruling elites, the dominant interests of one country, control the land, the labor, the resources, the technology, the markets, and the wealth, the financial structure of another country, to the detriment of the ordinary people in the other country, and often to great cost to the people in the metropolitan country, in the imperialist country too. In other words, we aren't the benefits of U.S. imperialism in Central America. We help pay a lot of the overhead costs. We pay high taxes. We pay, in terms of the high taxes, to pay for that global military machine which controls, which is set up. It really costs a lot of money to have 14 aircraft carrier units. You don't get just an aircraft carrier. When you send out an aircraft carrier, you have to have destroyers and cruisers and all sorts of surveillance planes and protect it. It's a whole force. 14 aircraft carrier forces, 300 major military bases all around the world. We pay that. When you're worried about scholarships or you're not getting it, or high taxes or this, that, you got to understand that's where that money's going. And you're paying. You pay palpably. A lot of you I know have already worked and earned your first paycheck. Do you remember that sensation when you got that first paycheck and you looked at it and you said, there must be some mistake. And you said, no, there's no mistake. Here's the rest over here. We took off for this, for that. We took off for the cruise missiles, for the new tactical air-to-surface missiles. We took off for the B-1 bomber and the B-2 bomber and all that. Well, we called it federal taxes, though. Well, that's what you're paying for, and that's coming palpably right out of the lives of our people. When we don't have money for roads, and we don't have money for hospitals, when we have to cut rehabilitation clinics for drug addicts, and we don't have the money for it. We don't have money for textbooks in schools in some parts of this country. It's because that money is going to pay for the overhead costs of imperialism, to protect and maintain a U.S. force throughout the world, to protect that class that George Bush belongs to protect his friends of that class. And to protect that class, you have to protect that system that serves that class. And to protect that system, you have to protect that military, that global military establishment that protects that system. You can understand now why when Reagan went into the Persian Gulf with that fleet to protect the oil supply coming out during the Iran-Iraq war, And people said, wait a minute, this whole operation is costing us $2 for every dollar's worth of oil we're taking out. That's a losing proposition. But Reagan kept doing it. Why? Because the $2 was being paid by you out of that little paycheck that you get. And the $1 went to the oil cartels. And people said, wait a minute. About 18% of that, or what was it, 12% of that oil comes here. The rest of it goes to France and Japan and Germany and other places. That's right. They're not protecting your oil supply. They're protecting, and they're not protecting Japan and France's oil supply. They're protecting the oil supply of the Seven Sisters, the giant oil companies. They're protecting Gulf and Exxon and Mobil and British Petroleum, and that's what they're doing. And they'll spend $2 of your money to protect $1 of their money. They'll spend $3, $4, $5 of your money. Money is no object when it's your money protecting my money.